Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Sunday Night Live, your favorite automotive show where we talk about the issues that affect the customer experience in your stores. And we also talk about those things that make you more efficient and more profitable. And we're kicking off 2025 a little bit later, had a couple of weeks vacation in Aruba. You know, it's hard not to just eat and hang out at the beach. So I was not able to do the show. And then next week, of course, is the Super Bowl. So the year's starting off a little different than usual. But my wife says I work too much. And last year I worked right through, didn't take really any vacation time. So we started this year off making sure that we did that and got it out of the way. And I'm very fortunate because I have a great network of friends and colleagues and connections that are out there every day. And one of the biggest problems that I hear in stores when I go in, and I'm in stores every week, sometimes a couple of stores a day, and everybody's complaining they can't get used car inventory. They're not making money on the new. They want to get used cars, but they either don't have a strategy or just don't have the bandwidth or the know-how to get it done. So I've got Frank Knox and John Ellis, who are friends and colleagues that I brought on here. They've got a couple of really nifty things that'll help you do some of the things that you're struggling with. So welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, Paul.
All right. Those that may not know you, why don't you just give a kind of a cliff notes of who you are, what you do, and how you got here, starting with Frank.
Frank Knox, VP of Unique Auto Sourcing. Been with Unique now for, almost 2 years. Before that, spent about 2.5 years at Off Lease Only, one of the largest independent dealers in the Southeast. And then prior to that, spent 17.5 years at CarMax, all that time in the acquisition space, really learning all the tricks of the trade to go out and acquire inventory, whether direct from consumer, which I'm sure a lot of people want to hear about, but also auction. And then, at the end of my tenure with them, spending some time launching Max Offer with CarMax.
Excellent. Welcome to the show. That's a rich history there, man.
Thank you.
John?
Hey, Paul. Hey, guys, everybody. I'm John Ellis. Like Frank, I've been in the business a little over 20 years. 17 and a half of my years with Cox Automotive were in every space that Cox represents. So inventory management, inventory acquisition, V-Auto, which would be inventory strategy. Kelly Blue Book, I was there when we acquired that and helped build that product out to the offering today. Started off with Auto Trader and their media positions and finished leading inventory strategy, acquisition, retail, and disposal for our largest dealers in North America. So the Penske's, the AutoNations, the Cochrans, the Rormans, and Napletons were all my clients. Before I moved into EV battery solutions with Cox for my last 2 years. When I retired at 55 a couple of Septembers ago, I've always helped our dealers figure out how to run a good used car playbook. I built some Excel spreadsheets, but we're going to talk today about Agile Auto. That is the Nick Saban playbook of used car operations, and it's to help exactly what you said, Paul, build a good, robust strategy for that used car department. And then, of course, the last piece of that puzzle, you'll hear from Frank today. He helps solve that. How do I go find it? Now that I know what I need, how much I need, and where its best comes from, I still need help finding it. So excited to have this conversation with you today, Paul.
Well, thank you and welcome. I love John because there are times that something comes into my head and I want to bounce it off somebody, and I pick up the phone and I call John. And unless he's in a meeting, he's usually there, and we're able to have some good collaborative conversations. So welcome both of you, gentlemen. So inventory is limited. So you really need a good strategy on how and where and what and when, right? So kind of walk us through, you guys work pretty well together. Walk us through how that looks and how you're able to find those nuggets.
Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and start, Frank, because you kind of finished, you closed the deal, if we can say it that way. So working with stores and groups like Cochrane pre and post COVID, the two things that really started to rear its ugly head due to COVID was supply and demand, and affordability followed that as a third leg of the stool. Fortunately, the government stimulated the market, and so we artificially infused the demand side of that equation, and that brought additional problems to our automotive industry, which we're feeling and reeling from today. But it all boils down to we're in a brand new market, and dealers that are thinking, I'm just going to buy and sell cars the way I've always done it, it's going to be tough, and we've seen that. We saw that in 2022. We saw it in 2023. 2024 was a great year, but not for every dealer. And there were some quarters that felt like the worst year they've ever had. And it's because the game plan is not, it has not morphed into the new automotive strategy, if you will, for a lack of a better term. So, what I've been doing for the last 5 years is just talking to dealers about acquisition, retail, and disposal based on market conditions and sales rate, but also through the best channel efficiency model they can find so that they can say balance to the market and not ever be over leveraged or under leveraged to their demand, but also to the market conditions, because these markets will flip on a dime. And we will talk about some of that today, but East Coast storms, West Coast fires, and now the tariffs up north and south. We're in for another tsunami. And if dealers don't know how to ride this tsunami wave, they're going to have some profitability months, but they're going to have more unprofitable months, because if you're not constantly watching daily acquisition versus daily sale and then managing the proper channels, it's going to be very difficult to stay balanced. So talking to my partner Toothman Ford and JR Toothman, working with them for a couple of years, we're like, how can we help dealers do this using AI so they never have to worry about anything but running their business, go to sleep at night knowing they're completely leveraged and they're risk averse to the best they can be in this volatile market? How can we keep wholesale losses and age down? How can we grow sales rate profitably instead of just growing sales rate? All of what we've seen, the mistakes we've made. And so we built some programs called the Used Car Optimizer early on, and that's morphed into a larger enterprise program called Agile Auto that's been in market for now little over a year. And it's an enterprise level software that keeps dealers completely on autopilot when it comes to acquisition and sales pace and channel efficiency, and then retail and disposal strategy. The dealers that use it are seeing over 100% growth in unit sales pace. They're seeing over 150% growth in PVR, but here's a better number. 190% is the average gross in departmental growth. So think about those numbers. Now, why is that? And that sounds like unicorns and cotton candy. And it's only because of this. The Nick Saban playbook of used car management is the tortoise beats the hare. So think about that. If I'm constantly running and stopping and looking over here for a month and looking over there for a month and paying attention to sales rate but not acquisition, or just getting cars and not looking at channel efficiency or by channel efficiency, what ends up happening is I've got a topsy-turvy world, and the hare always wins. So if I can learn how to build a model that has a tortoise mentality in my acquisition, retail, and disposal, I will always beat the market, and I will always beat the competition, meaning the market dynamics and my competition in the market, because they're going to be chasing their tail in this volatile market. Auto builds that for dealers using AI, and then all they have to do is run the play each and every day right there on their dashboard, and they'll have just what I said, that Nick Saban playbook of used car operational management. We're having a lot of fun with it, and we're having a lot of success. The last piece of that puzzle, Paul, was where Frank comes in. Do you want to ask something first?
Yeah. So when you say enterprise level, so a multi-store group, they can have all their stores in, and they can look at it across the enterprise. They can make moves, things like that, right?
Yeah, so we break the enterprise up into groups, regions, and stores. So regions can compete with regions. Ford stores can compete with Ford stores across the enterprise. Visibility to the entire region. So a region manager has his own dashboard with all the stores underneath. So we can see, think about the leverage of a 20 region store. If you're under or over leverage at that aggregate level, you can be in a lot of trouble pretty quickly. So they can stay very balanced at a region level and then distribute that balance by store to keep their stores healthy. At the
Right.
enterprise level, you can look at either your group or your store rolled up. They have their own dashboard. All the dashboards look the same. It's just a roll up. So it's very easy to see. Or they can
Right.
look at their regions, say region one is good, region two is out of balance, and region three is moving away from balance. How do I get my managers all balanced back together? And that's the beautiful part of Agile Auto is the AI gives them prescriptive levers to pull to put everybody back into balance. So again, all you have to do is run your business knowing we've got your back, and we can see things from a 360 view that most dealers cannot, even at the store level, but certainly at the enterprise level.
Well, what I like about that is that there are certain markets that do better with certain cars, right? And if you
Absolutely.
have visibility, there's a big outfit that's been very successful doing that, where they're able to move the inventory or they're able to buy and place better because they have that kind of reach.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so when you think about it really starts with a high level view, and then you start getting really granular. You start drilling down more and more into, well, what exactly is needed and how am I going to source it? Because that's the number one question that comes up after everything, right? The number one question is, this all looks great, but how am I going to execute the play? I don't have the players to go out and execute it. So when off lease only, when I left off lease only, and I started talking to Justin Campbell, who is the president and owner of Unique Auto Sales. He's a wholesaler, and he got the question many times: how can I buy cars like you? You always have all these cars in the auction lined up, and CarMax, Carvana, Drive Time, they're there bidding on them. I want to have the team to go out and buy those cars. And so we decided, why not put together that team? Why not put together a team of experts that have 20 plus years in the industry that can go out and source that inventory for dealers? And so all Unique Auto Sourcing was then born. We decided that we would grab some very experienced buyers, each of them with 20, 25 years of doing nothing but buying cars, and put them on a team to act as an extension of the dealerships to go out and source inventory using John's tool, and then drilling down, and the dealer, me consulting with that dealer to talk about, well, what exactly are we going out there and sourcing? How are we going to source it? What mileage, what cost to market, Canadian or not, frame damage or not? We're drilling in so deep so that the buyer who has that list, it's bulletproof. We've decided that these are the cars we're going to go out. Great, go out and find them. And then I get the question, well, why can't other people just do this? Well, one, most don't have that level of experience. I don't know 25-year veterans that are just falling off of trees right now. And if they are, please let me know, because I want to add some more people on. But the other side of that is dealers, used car managers that are that experienced simply don't have the bandwidth to sit in front of that computer for 10 to 12 hours shopping for the specific inventory that they need. So what happens? We all know what happens. That most sit there a couple hours and, all right, you know what? I got to buy some cars today. I'm going to buy a couple of these. I'm going to grab this rental list. I'm going to get this inventory filled out, even though it may not be the right pieces. It's never a case when I talk to used car managers. It's never a case that they knew that they didn't know that they were buying these rentals and that they weren't going to be good. More times than not, what I hear is, I didn't have a choice. I had to have some inventory, and I just didn't have the time to do it any other way.
They're checking the box.
Well,
And
they're checking the box, but it's because they have these other pressing issues that they're trying to desk deals. They're trying to do appraisals. They're trying to buy cars off the service drive. They're trying to train and develop associates in the store. So now you say, well, what do they prioritize? Well, those other things are pretty important. So now they just end up prioritizing, well, I'm going to have to source inventory as well. We take all of that off of their plate and say, we'll build a buy plan for you. We'll source the inventory for you. We will handle the transportation for you. And if the car needs to be arbitrated, we'll handle that for you as well.
so you guys are essentially today's A team.
Well, Paul, you said something in the beginning, and I want to point it out here because a lot of people are listening. They're going, "We don't buy from the auction. I don't need that." So let me tell you how this works so well together. Most of the dealers that come onto A Auto are pretty sizable, well positioned new car franchises, and they have a lot of inventory that comes into the store for used car retail. So they consider themselves 80 to 90% self-sufficient, and so some even 99%. And what we're finding is the reason they're coming to A Auto is well, I want to grow my used cars. That's fantastic, and we want to grow them the right way, because when we go to the auction to try to grow, we end up losing money on everything we buy. So we're just going to stay in our comfort zone and buy and sell what we trade for and what we can't acquire on the curb, either through ICO or through the service drive. And that's where we are. But we really do want to grow. So that's where A Auto comes in, because not only do we absorb 12 months of data and research every buy channel. So when we say auction, trade, and direct, we mean you can have 20 channels under direct, KBB ICO, you can have the service lane, you can have your tools, and you can measure. Even Frank under auction. Frank's team would be one of the micro channels under auction, like ACV and Manheim and UAS. So we absorb that data, and we can give them a snapshot of how well they've been paying attention to the right buy channels, and then where they've been missing their acquisition performance and wholesale. And then what they say is, well, I still want to grow. You've told me how to stay balanced, so my wholesale profit and losses are good. I'm not losing money on wholesale anymore. My aging looks great because your buy plan is AI driven to watch me every moment of the day, and you're just keeping me in balance. So I'm not worried about being in trouble. Still want to grow. And that's where we go, okay, well, then you need to step outside your comfort zone. And if you're not comfortable doing it and looking at these results, it looks like you're still studying that market. Frank and his team can teach you and show you what they do and do it, supplement some of that for you, but also bring you along with them on the journey so you get better. What ends up happening, this is how we're seeing the results I gave you earlier, they'll use Frank to supplement auction buys and take his advice on what they should buy. They'll go from 100 to 120 in sales rate, maybe to 130 after about 3 months. And then their dependency, we measure their dependency on channels on auction jumped up to, let's say, from 5% to 30%. And on month 4, it's down to 5% again. Why is that? Because sales rate has brought in the new trades and all the new internal business to where now they're grabbing that 120, 130 sales rate of sales internally again. But you can't go from 90 to 100 to 120 to 130 without getting additional external inventory first. And that's how you come back into round. A Auto does that for you, shows you how to do that automatically. The only thing A Auto doesn't do is go buy them for you yet. We're working with Frank to make that automatic. But in the interim, Frank's team can do that like no one else can because of the multiple 25-year CarMax acquisition veterans that he has on his team that can do that when a used car manager just can't.
The scenario you painted before, I've heard that over and over going into stores. So you're right you've got your hand on the pulse. You're right in the store, in the market. So I love it. And as far as the people calling, look, no two stores are exactly the same. And I'm sure there are stores where the employees are doing a decent job in making the calls. But the reality, for the most part, from what I've seen, is that these aren't the type of veterans that you're talking about that have been in the game, in the used car game, right? These are sales people that are incentivized. They make calls, but the phone and the salesperson today, they seem to be like two magnets that aren't attracting, right?
Yeah.
How many moves do you get before to give up?
Well, and look, I'm on this crusade, Paul, to get the industry to stop saying that auctions are bad. I really am, because auctions aren't bad. Perhaps the strategy that we approach the auction with is bad, but you can have a bad strategy when it comes to direct from consumer purchases. I was talking to a dealer, and we started talking about his strategy for direct from consumer, and he goes, "Well, I just, I beat CarMax on their appraisals, and I win a lot of cars." And I said, "Well, you probably do win a lot of cars, but I'm going to bet for you lose on a lot of those cars because you're not the best end user on those cars. CarMax has nothing but data. They have a room full of analysts that they do nothing but crunch numbers, and they understand who the best end user is for those cars, which is why they have one of the largest auctions in the country, because they dispose of the cars that don't make sense for them, right? They're going to buy them all. They're going to buy every single car, and they're going to decide the minute they buy it, whether it's wholesale or whether it's retail. So direct from consumer, yeah, it's great if you have the right strategy. Auctions can be great if you have the right strategy. Rental cars can be great if you have the right strategy. In the end, it really comes down to that piece. And that's what John and I really work with dealers to help them understand. What is the strategy around these cars? Where do you need to be? How many cars do we need to ingest internally to make sure that we offset the cars that we go out to the auction and buy? Because we know we're going to go out there and find cars, and chances are those auction cars, you may take a little bit of a loss on those cars on the front end, but you're going to get the back end, you're going to get the trade, and that's going to spur the activity for months to come. And so when we write the playbook for these dealers, it's an overall playbook, not one that just says, hey, Frank's team's going to come in and buy cars for you at the auction. We've never once told a dealer that we want to come in and just buy auction cars for them. What we say to every dealer that comes on board with us is, look, our goal is to get you in a position where you really don't have to use Frank except for supplemental inventory for those pieces that you need, that you know you have a customer lined up for. You know you need that night edition RAM, but you can't afford to sit there all day and look for it. That's what you can use Frank's team for eventually. And we've grown dealerships that way. And none of our dealers, some of our very first clients, when we first started this, are still with us, and they're doing quite well.
Well, you're looking at big picture, right? A lot of times these guys are not looking at big picture. You know, they do what they can when they have time to do it while they're doing 40 other things. I want to get to a few comments before we get too deep in. My good buddy Larry Feldman says, hi, Paul, John, and Frank.
Hey, Larry.
You guys both know Larry?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
very
great
well.
guy. Ricky Lopez, hi, Paul. And Ricky says, that's why we've trained our salespeople for 2 hours daily to call cars.com, Auto Trader, anything that's available out there as a used car that we could use in our dealership, and pay $300 per car.
Nice, very important.
Work it well, but a lot don't, you know.
And I think Frank brought something up I don't want to skip. I love Ricky's comment. We can come to that. We should pay people as well, if not better, to buy cars than sell cars. But before we get to that, Frank, the term in the industry today, and I think Brian Kramer may have termed it, but maybe it was even before that, best end user. How many times are we hearing that these days? Best end user, best end user. And a lot of times we get confused going, are we talking about the consumer or the dealer? What do you mean? So in this instance, we're certainly talking about the dealer. And what Frank's talking about, and what our new NADA rollout is our A rank profitability score, but also the VIN lookup of that. So if you have inventory that's coming into your lot, either through any one of your channels, you can pump it through our VIN lookup algorithm, and it's going to look over whatever you choose, 90, 120, whatever data set you want, and say, this is a car that I'm a good end user for. Now, let me give you the parameters of end user. I've already told you front, back, total, and then turn, right? You can make $5,000 on a car that turned in 100 days, and that's no good. No good. You want to turn a car for $2,000 every 20 days. And so certainly if you held it too long and you made $5,000, thank goodness you did, we got over it. But we don't want to make that a best practice. So we have an algorithm that reads all of that data, including turn, to find your best strategy. But the VIN lookup will allow you to ingest these VINs of inventory that you're getting in on trade or service or direct to know its initial disposition. Like CarMax, you'll know right away, is this a car that I can retail profitably, or do I hold on to this car long and then I need to go ahead and let it go for the $1,500 I'll get on it at the auction or from Car Offer or so on and so forth. And that is a critical turn element that dealers miss, because when they bring in direct and consumer, whatever channel, they think, I don't care if I'm the best end user, I'm going to hold this for gross. I didn't have to pay transport. I had my fingers on it, so the recon's more manageable because I saw it before I gave a number, and then I didn't pay a buy fee. So guess what? All of that factored in, I went 4,500 total on this thing, and until I get it, you hold that baby. Well, 65 days later, they're going, what's going on? Why is this car still here? Because you weren't the best end user. So Auto will now tell you for every vehicle that you bring in, are you the best end user? And if you are not, then what do I do with it? And that's where Frank comes in, because he's got a disposal arm and a sourcing arm that allow you put that on his list, and you get the best offer you can get, or based on your floor offer. And man, if you keep that engine running like that, you're going to take more market share than you can take. You're going to be full, because dealers are not doing that right now. They're not thinking about best end user. They're just thinking about inventory volume, not quality.
That's right.
When I hear about used car departments taking losses, I'm like, are you kidding?
Huge. You wouldn't believe some of the stuff we see, Paul.
Oh,
And most of it is write downs and out of the back door. So like grosses look good, retail units are okay, they're not great, but they're good. Problem is, what are you losing out of the back? And that's one thing about Auto that Scott Simons loves so much. Scott's a recent investor and a partner. I know you know Scott, former managing partner of Carter Myers Automotive Group, now on his own. So if you need a consultant, Scott's your man. Boy, he's brilliant. Well, one of the things he taught us was, I need to track net number all month long. I don't want to fool myself. I want my GM to be fooled, and I certainly don't want to report a number inaccurately after the month's over. So Auto tracks gross to net. So nobody in the whole organization, the general manager, the used car manager, everybody sees my gross, but also my net on the same screen. So you know if you're managing your inventory well. You may be a great sales organization, but I'm horrible at acquisition.
Yeah.
How many stores do you see where the salesman's pounding his chest? He made 2 pounds on this car, but no, actually you didn't, because when we factor in what we're into the car for, when we factor in how long we've been carrying it, when we factor in the damage that happened, and all
right.
this other stuff, you have it. But because they're not looking at the net. They're looking at the gross. So I like that piece of it. So you see both right there, right in front of you.
Because look, we know that not everybody in the organization sees the full P&L, and they shouldn't. But everybody should have a full picture of how healthy the dealership used car operations are.
Right. 100%. Let me get to a couple of comments. John Gottschalk, my buddy, nice hat, Paul. This hat came straight from Ireland. Got it in Ireland.
Of course they did.
There. Matt Lamoureux, welcome back, Paul. Hope the transition back is easy. You definitely look refreshed. Aruba must have treated you well. Too well. It was one fine dining adventure after another. It's funny. People go on vacation, and the pictures that you see are them and a rock or some other stuff. Most of my pictures are at a restaurant.
Yeah, we know.
As it should be. As it should be.
I love it, Paul.
So walk me through your piece a little bit more, Frank.
Yeah, so ultimately, so John mentioned the wholesale arm. I think that's where things started for Unique Auto Sales, right? Like we started off as a wholesale company, and so when we talk to dealers, that's a component that some dealers will lose sight of. Is that, look, if you have aged inventory, we'll put a number on those cars. You may not like the number, but that's what the car is worth. So, I think Jason Rice worked the facts, right? Like that. The fact is that's what the car is worth. So just accept it. And so when we started that wholesale division, and then we branched off into the sourcing division, we started really drilling down. And like I said, we got really granular with the dealers and really walking them through. I had a great mentor when I was at Off Lease Only, who used to kick my butt, sitting there until midnight some nights with him going through cars, right? We had 5,000 cars, 7,000 cars at the highest point in inventory. And we would go through those cars and we would talk about the inventory. And sometimes I hated it. I hated sitting there till midnight with him, but I learned so much from him. And he was the COO who he beat me up. And that piece I brought with me outside, and that's what I'm working with so many dealers on, is helping them to understand, how do you look at your 40 or 50 cars in that way? through the same lens that I was looking at 5,000 cars through, right? Because that's what matters the most. And then if you can't, again, I've heard so many people now, and I think David Long said it, that he does it in his store, and that's, the daily acquisition rate. And John was just talking about that. That's something that he and I outlined when we first started together is, well, we know, when you look at the used car optimizer that John built, it outlined, hey, you need to go out and buy this many cars every single week. And if you get behind, understand you're going to be hurting because this is what's going to happen the next week and the next week and the next week. And then we started breaking that down to a daily number, right? Well, who does that? Who else does that? CarMax does that. That's exactly the playbook that CarMax has run since I started back in 03. We had a number of cars that we needed to source every single day. And if you didn't hit that number, you needed to understand why you didn't hit that number. Acquisitions aren't going to get easier. We know what's coming at us. We know that there's an inventory. And so let me be careful when I say this. There's not an inventory shortage. There's a ton of inventory out there. But the right inventory is not out there, right? And that's what we need to talk about is the right inventory is not out there. I'll give you an example, Paul. I was looking for a dealer today. I was shopping for, yes, on a Sunday, we're still working. We're still plugging ahead. We're still trying to find cars. I'm looking for pickup trucks. I'm looking for Silverados. I'm in the GM event sale today. There's 600 cars in the GM event sale for the weekend. You know how many were Silverados? 100. 100 out of the 600. You know how many of the out of the 100 Silverados, you know how many were Canadian?
Hey?
75.
See what I did there?
75 over the 100. And of the 75 that were Canadian, only 12 of them were V8s. So think about that for a second. If you want a V8 American-made Silverado, there aren't any on the GM event sale, which means that you're going to go buy that car. If you buy it, you're going to buy it from another dealer. You're going to have to pay a premium for that car. But these are the things that dealers get that granular to understand exactly what's out there in the market before they decide what they're going to pay for a car. I know if I find a Silverado that's a V8 that's American made, I'm going to pay whatever it takes to own that car. And I'm going to bet CarMax has an understanding as well that they are going to pay whatever it takes to own that car because the law of supply and demand, I will be the only one that has that truck, period, because there's none out there. So, and that goes across the board. I do that with every single make model that's really out there that's in high demand. What's out there? What is the dealer looking for? And then, Mr. Dealer, you're telling me you want to source that car at 95% cost to market. Good luck. You can't even get in the game until 97 cost to market. And I might not be able to source it for that. Well, why do I know that? Because I've watched 100 of them run through in the last couple of days. That's what my team supplies to dealers. And that's what most dealers aren't going to have, that working knowledge. I'll close it out with saying this. When you think about CarMax and what they do, when CarMax goes to an auction, I remember being in an auction, and this goes back to the point of understanding the best end user. I'm standing in the chase lane. This probably was, 2010. I'm standing in the chase lane, and I'm watching Range Rovers roll through, and nobody's bidding on them. And, it's just me and the auctioneer, and he's dropping these things down. Hey, I got to get a bid. What are they worth? I'm like, well, they're worth nothing to CarMax. What do you mean they're worth nothing? Surely they're worth something. We're not the best end user. Now, I didn't say that in that language, but in essence, I said it doesn't work for CarMax. That truck does not, that Range Rover won't work for us. That's understanding the best end user. I would encourage every dealer to really start to embrace that and understand who's the best end user for the vehicle. Because if you're holding a car for 60 days, you are not the best end user on that vehicle. You can fool yourself and tell yourself that you are, but you are not. So you could have gotten rid of that car through a wholesale channel at day 7, at day 10, and probably got your money for it and made a little bit of a profit at that point in time and went and bought two more or three more of something, that you would have turned that profit over and over again. So that's the things that we talk about with dealers. Those are the things that we do for dealers. And that's the knowledge that when I hop on a call every week with my dealer base, that's the information that I'm providing to them is here's what's in the market, here's what's working, here's what's not, and how do we build a strategy that's going to make you successful in the auction channel, not just in the direct from consumer channel, not just in the rental channel, but in every single channel. When you talk about building a buy center for a dealer, the buy center isn't just, hey, I'm going to buy your cars off the service drive. The buy center are all these working parts that all those years that I spent at CarMax that they perfected and sort of instilled in me that, hey, it doesn't matter where we get the car from. All that matters is the strategy and what we pay for the car.
I love it. I want to get to a couple of comments, then I'm going to follow up on that. Love this conversation, man. John Gottschalk says, looks good on you, the hat. Thank you, John. And Ricky Lopez, auctions are not bad. The problem is we have too many new managers because all the old retired managers are gone, so they don't know what they're doing and don't hold self accountable. They hold the option. Oh, we just lost
John.
I'm sure he'll be back. He probably had he's mobile, so he may be in a place where there's some
you still got me, buddy. You still got me.
They hold the option. They hold the option accountable, but I know a lot of dealerships are doing really well in the auction. Great point. You know, what's beautiful is that you guys have a strategy, like a wicked strategy, a big picture strategy. It's not just, okay, let's go buy cars off the street. Hey, you three guys, you're going to make so many calls per day. No. It's a whole strategy. So you look at the data, you consult with the dealer to find out what their goals are, and then you work on a plan, but not just a plan bringing them in, but also a plan moving them out. That's the part where I think a lot of dealers suffer, a lot. Okay, as you say, they buy the wrong cars because they have to, right? We've heard this 100 times, but then they sit there. Whereas, so now you guys actually, you're a living, breathing organism that not only looks what needs to come in, and I love, look, I'm not going to lie, I was not a big fan of the auction, okay? But it definitely is a part of your overall strategy. Maybe it's not the entire strategy, but let's face it, if there are only so many cars, you need to do whatever you need to do to bring them in. Activity breeds activity, right? You make a little bit on this one, a lot on that one. In the mix, it all works out.
Well, and you know the best part about the auction? The data collection.
Yes.
That's the best part about. So, again, I'm going to go back and people probably are tired of me talking about my history at CarMax, but it was such a rich history, and I learned so much from that organization. And I took that and used that when I went to Off Lease Only, and I'm still using that stuff today. And why not learn from the biggest and the best player that's out there? But when you see that CarMax associate at the auction, the bulk of what they're doing for the day, as they sit there with their notebook and they're writing down every single car that ran through, what that car sold for, what that car no sold for, was there activity on the car. So you want to talk about the king of data? CarMax has all this data for years and years and years of people standing in the lanes, collecting information, knowing exactly what cars are selling for, exactly what they're no selling for, and then taking that information and applying that information to their direct from consumer channels. So when they're putting a number on a car that's at the store, they're getting it right. They know exactly what that car is worth, and it's real time, because the guy was just at the auction yesterday watching those cars.
And when you have that kind of knowledge, you get that kind of confidence. And the confidence is what gets you that deal.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan. So on the wholesale side, of Unique Auto, we use AccuTrade, right? Like we use AccuTrade to determine and help us determine what cars are worth. Why? Because they're doing the same thing. They're collecting real-time data. They're using the same formula that CarMax is using. So if those two are using it, why? Like I look at dealers and I go, why? Like why would you not look at real-time data to help you determine what a car is worth? Do not allow your strategy to be the same as a CarMax. You will lose that battle every time.
Right.
What is your strategy, and what are the cars that work the best for you?
You know, it may be cliche, but data is the new currency.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And having the data. But I'm still blown away by the wholesale side of things, because that's just something that very few stores that at least that I've been in, and I'm in a lot of stores, really have a wholesale strategy. It's just kind of, these cars have been sitting here, let's get rid of them. But there's no proactive strategy to maximize your profits, even on that side of things. That's just the piece that holds me away.
Yeah, and that's a piece that we're really working to help dealers with as well, is that we want to be able to go in and we want to help dealers understand that, look, somewhere along the lines, we came up with a couple of things that were tried and true in the industry, that were successful, that we said, we don't want to do those things anymore as an industry. And one of them was going to the auction, and the other one was selling a car to a wholesaler. Like, all of a sudden, those two things became really, really bad. And it was like, well, wait a minute. You have this guy who's standing at your doorstep telling you, hey, I will pay you X amount of dollars for that car. And either you can say yes or no. But if you're not the best end user, then why not get rid of that car right away, today, and not have to spend any resources to get rid of that car if you're not the best end user? I'll give you an example. Couple weeks ago, we had, and I posted it on my LinkedIn, we had a customer call us, and they wanted to get rid of two Lamborghinis. Two. We wrote them checks for those Lamborghinis. You don't want those Lamborghinis on your books, do you? Most people don't. So why not let us buy those cars, and then you go spend that $250,000 and buy 10, $25,000 cars? That's the play, right? And that's what we continue to talk with dealers about, is to help understand that, look, we are a viable option when it comes to helping to liquidate wholesale inventory, but helping you to source inventory. And then recently, we just stood up a consulting arm to help guide and teach dealers as well, as best we can.
Now, the stuff that you teach them, we're talking. Who do you work with? You work with the managers. You work with who do you work with?
Typically, I'm working with the used car manager, or I'm working with the used car director, one of the two. And then from there, we're digging in. We're diving deep into understanding exactly what it is that their business actually needs. And I'll tell you, Paul, the one thing that happened through COVID was there was a suction of talent that left the industry. And I don't know where it went. I think a lot of it retired. I think a lot of it took the money and said, I'm going to go do something else. But they're like, all of a sudden, like, I have so many managers that are new to this game. I have so many people that were, hey, I was a BDC manager, and now I'm the used car manager, or I was a sales manager, and now I'm the used car manager. I was, I don't know if I should say this or not. I'm going to say it. I have a dealer. I have a dealer, no names, but we're talking. And, one of the things that I do when I go in is I start walking through, hey, here are all the sources that we go out to, all the platforms that we source inventory from. I want to make sure that we're on Manheim, Odessa, ACV, Smart Auction, OBE, Open Lane, you name it, we're there. And all of these, my team, they're all skilled at working these platforms. And the dealer, the used car manager, calls me back and says, hey, what's Smart Auction? I never heard of that. What is that? I go, really? But again, I had to stop and go, well, this guy, he was a sales manager. And he's asking me, what is this platform? Because he clearly doesn't know. And it's my job now to teach and to train. And we have more of that maybe in the industry than maybe we're even willing to admit. We took some people that were really good people, that were really good at their jobs, and said, yep, we can make them really good at this job as well. You think about that, and an organization like a CarMax, in order for you to write a check and be a buyer on your own, you didn't get that ability. You went through 8 to 10 months of training before you were even allowed to go to an auction by yourself.
Here's an interesting part. Okay, you talk about the end user. Okay, you have to be able to say whether or not you're the right end user for that. I equate that to something called self-awareness.
Yes.
In automotive, I hate to say it, and I hope nobody gets their feathers ruffled, but we're not the greatest at self-awareness. So I would imagine it's got to be difficult to make that transition to being able to admit whether or not you're the right end user. Do you see people struggle with that?
Yes. I mean, to simply put it, yes, because unfortunately, what happens, Paul, is ego kicks in, and people go, I can sell anything. Give me the car, and I'm going to sell. No. That mentality of I can sell anything has only really crept up over the last couple of years. Prior to that, like, it was, hey, I specialize in selling this. And somehow that morphed into, I can sell them all. I can sell anything. Well, I would argue that, yeah, you can sell anything at a certain price, and if you're willing to take a loss.
Right. That's not selling it.
Yeah, anyone can do that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's not selling. That's simply hoping for the best.
Right.
Like, in my mind, like, I look at it and I say, look, if you are a best end user of a car, I would imagine that you're trying to turn that car, and you can turn that car within, I don't know, 30 days, 45 days, if you're truly the best end user and you can do it profitably, right? And when I say profitably, I'm talking about you have to look at your pack, you have to look at your absorption rate, you have to look at all those things and determine
all the pieces.
Don't just say, hey, I lost money on the front end, but forget about all the other things that you made money on, right? So if you are profitably turning that car in 30 to 45 days, then you're probably a good end user for that car. But if you're holding on to a car for 60 days, 90 days, I have some dealers, Paul, that have cars on their lot for 120 days.
Wow. That's crazy. Those guys have never heard the term. Well, those guys have never heard the term, your first loss is your best loss, if they're keeping it that long, right?
That's right. That is right.
Let me get to a couple of comments. Let's see here. All right. So to Ricky's point about all these managers that have left, yeah, I mean, it's the greatest exodus of an industry or a place since that bearded guy parted the sea years ago, right? It's amazing. The last 4 years have been such a roller coaster ride, and we're not done by any means. John Gottschalk says, great advice, Frank. He says,
thank you, John.
Know who you are selling that vehicle to before you buy it. Love it. And you know what the one of the most important parts are? Commitment, right? You have to know what you're doing. And then once you commit, you need to follow through. That car's got to be frontline ready like yesterday. Okay. I've seen enough stores where they buy something, they don't do the work to it. They want to see first if there's going to be a buyer on it before they commit to recon, which is insane because nobody's going to buy it when it looks like crap. And then 60, 90 days later, then they're looking to bail on the car. You have a
Yeah.
strategy, make the commitment, and jump into the pool and start swimming. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Ricky Lopez, some of the great used car managers that I've worked with are CRM masters. They know their CRM, they know their customers, and they know their vehicles. Wow. That's a mic drop statement right there, because there are a lot of stores. I'll use an EV example. Okay. Everybody's complaining. They're crying. They can't sell the EVs. They've been sitting on the lot like lead. Well, guess what? Some of those guys are in for a really big surprise coming up real soon, because if they thought it was bad then, it's going to get even worse now, right? But these people, they you ask them, well, how many have you sold? I've sold 100 of them. Okay, can you give me the name of 5 of your customers? It's such a lead balloon, right?
Yeah.
You would think that it would be important for them to develop a strategy to move them. So I asked them, can you give me 5 names of customers that bought them from you? They can't.
No.
Because it was just a transaction. They don't know who the people are. They don't care who the people are. But how are you going to improve if you don't know that intimately? So Ricky, again, they know their customers and they know their vehicles. Magic words.
Yeah, I will tell you, when I spent those years at Off Lease Only, and I'll say his name because I have to give recognition where recognition was due. But Alan McLaren, who is a veteran in this business, taught me so much about just that. And again, we're not talking about a small operation, Paul, right? Like, those who know Off Lease Only know, like, hey, we were selling 3,000, 3,500 cars a month out of 5 rooftops, right? So insane. But we would sit down and we would go through cars. And the one thing we would talk about is, and Alan would ask me, Frank, there's no leads on this car. Like, help me understand, like, why are there no leads on this car? Either it's the wrong car, either it's priced wrong, or there's something going on where there's no leads. And so that prompted me to really start digging into that sort of information. All those years that I learned at CarMax, to Ricky's point, that CRM piece and understanding the customer and what they want and understanding the leads and who's buying from you and when they're buying from you, that makes all the difference in the world. And so once I started, and unfortunately, Off Lease Only isn't around anymore, but once I started to understand that and apply that, it really changed how I looked at inventory, because I would look at inventory and go, well, man, I'm buying this car and it's back of the money. It's back of MMR, the magical MMR. Why is it not selling? Well, it wasn't a car that anybody wanted. It wasn't a car that I was the best end user for. I didn't have a customer who was even interested in this car, and I should have recognized that because I didn't have leads on it for the first 14 days it was out there. Time for me to do something with that car, right? Like, make the tough decision. Understand the facts around the decision.
I tell people it's metal. There's no emotional attachment. It's metal. Make your best plan and execute.
That's right.
Now, when you work on the consulting side of things, you get into the minutia as to whether they're working those leads effectively, the ones they are getting. How deep do you go on stuff like that?
So I won't get into how effective they're working the leads, because I really truly want to stay on the inventory side of things.
Yeah.
And so I'm using those leads to help guide our purchasing decisions and helping the dealers, the used car managers, to understand what their buy list and what their buy plan should look like. And again, it's using some of the same logic as the bigger players out there have used for many, many years to be successful, right? Like using your sales rate to help you determine when to start ramping up inventory, right?
Yeah.
Looking at all the economic factors. Like if I'm looking at I'm looking at everything that's coming, and this is what I'll say, because I know we're probably coming up on time here, but here's what I'll say around acquisitions. If you're not a little bit fearful of what's coming in the next month or so, then you're probably not looking at some key indicators. Because what I look at and I say, why am I fearful? Someone who's been doing this for a very, very long time, I truly believe there's still an inventory shortage of good quality inventory. We know that, right? Um, that's only going to get a bit worse with this tariff situation, right? We know that. I think it's Nissan. I think 60% of the cars that Nissan produces comes from Canada and Mexico. So what is that going to do to that inventory,
Whoa.
right? Volkswagen they're up there as well. Chevy, the big three, they're all up there in terms of so that could create a shortage as well for us. Now,
Yeah.
you have an existing shortage, you have tariffs that are coming at you. So these are headwinds that are coming at you. But on the backside of that, you have consumer sentiment that's rising. You have a more robust tax season that's coming based on customers or based on customers possibly getting better returns, right? So now you're going to have this frenzy of customers wanting to shop and feeling good about shopping being met with a shortage. What's going to happen, right? So I am very, very concerned with what's coming ahead. And look, the advice that I'm giving my dealers, and if people are listening in, the advice right now is you might want to think about stocking up on inventory because it can get really, really rough before it gets better. That's my take.
Yeah, no, it's
I hope I'm wrong, Paul. I hope I am completely off base and I'm completely wrong. And anyone tells me that I'm wrong 2 weeks from now, I'll completely accept it, and I'll be happy that I'm wrong at that point.
Unfortunately, we read some of the same headlines.
Yes,
and that's not something that I don't know. It looks pretty real. That's how I look at it. It looks pretty real. But you know what? We've gotten through a lot of shit before, right?
Yeah.
The auto business is a resilient business. We will get through this as well, but it's even more imperative that we're smarter about what we're doing now. So
yeah, it's just gonna be a little more challenging. That's all.
Yeah. For those out there that are not connected with Frank or John, by all means, I've tagged them in the post. By all means, reach out to them. If you're like me, I am always willing to connect with people that are relevant to my business. If I can help them or if they can help me, I welcome the connection. If you're a hairdresser out of Bangkok, there might not be a lot of need for us to connect. But I'm in food, I'm in cars, and I'm in yarn. So if there are any of those three things, and Frank and John are in automotive, they're in inventory, by all means, reach out to any of us. We'd be happy to connect. Any final words you want to leave us with, Frank, before we knock off here?
Paul, it's certainly been a pleasure this evening talking about something that's near and dear to my heart. I love the conversation around acquisition. I love the challenges that it presents. But the one thing that I would say is, at the end of the day, it really all just comes down to having the right strategy in place. Partner with whomever you need to come up with that strategy. There are some really, really good, sharp minds that are out there. David Long, Daryl Steed, Brian Kramer, Ron Morrison. There's just so many to name that I've been working with and talking with that really help me to understand this business more and more every day. And if you're not connected with some of those individuals, if you're not listening and not getting on these sorts of podcasts and these evening talks, by all means, take the time, hop on, talk to whomever you can to get information. And sometimes, yeah, that's going to mean that if the information is really valuable, you might have to pay for it, and that's okay, because that's an investment, not a payment.
Your network is your net worth. We've all heard that before. So, Frank, I want to thank you, and I want to thank John for coming on here and sharing some of the stuff that you do. I'm sure there are people out there struggling now. By all means, I hope they reach out to you. If I can help anyone, by all means, reach out to me as well. And with that, a couple of comments here. Let's see. Ricky Lopez says, you are 100% correct. John Gottschalk, I think you are correct. He says, thanks, Paul. Ricky Lopez, great stuff, guys. Really enjoyed the information. So with that, I wish everybody a safe and successful next week. Don't forget, next week is the Super Bowl. I'm not so foolish to think that I'm going to compete with the Super Bowl, because I'm not. I may not be a watcher of sports, but the rest of the world is. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Right. Frank, stay on for a moment after we go off here. All right. We'll see you in a couple of weeks on Sunday Night Live. Thanks for watching.